Let me underline something that we talked about briefly last night. Okay, today these changes apply to just 80,000 odd people, not many, with $3 million or more in their super funds. But that $3 million limit, that's going to stay. It's not indexed. It's going to stay when we've now got inflation above 7% a year. So that means if inflation remains relatively elevated, it won't be 7%, it'll be 4, 5, I don't know. That means it won't be long before many more Australians are going to get pushed into that bracket too. But this government has so rushed this move that it cannot even tell you how many more, or maybe it just won't tell you.
Will you let us know how many it scoops up in 5 years, 10 years, even 20 years?
Look, I think overwhelmingly Australians with a superannuation balance of around about $150,000 are pretty clear that this has nothing to do with them.
Joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt Canavan, things like what we've been seeing in the last couple of days, particularly today, just made me think this government's just making it up as it goes along. I mean, it said 10 months ago it had a plan. So much of this stuff was not in that so-called plan.
Well, Andrew, I think you're right. I mean, what we've seen from the Treasurer the last few weeks is the floating of more balloons than the Chinese Communist Party. Every different day there's a new idea about superannuation. Today there was the idea that maybe we should tax the family home. Let's do that. And now Anthony Albanese has played the role of Joe Biden here, and he's let these balloons fly through the sky for a few weeks before shooting them down today, showing the absolute mess and division that's at the top of this government. I think you're right to draw these comparisons to the 1970s. We have high inflations, we're getting high interest rates, we've got economic clouds on the horizon. But I think it's worse than Whitlam because, as you have pointed out, they didn't tell us this before the election. This is a massive breach of trust from the Australian Labor Party with the Australian people. At least, I wasn't around the 1970s, but at least from the reading I have of history is Gough Whitlam did run on change. He said it's time and he wanted to change things in Australia, and he was elected on that basis. Anthony Albanese definitely did not do that, and he's dudding the Australian people by only revealing these radical changes less than 12 months from the election.
Yeah, mind you, Matt, I differ on you on one point. Like, you seem to accept that there was a secret plan that he didn't tell us 10 months ago. I reckon he's just making it up. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, suddenly out of nowhere, this, that, the other, the caps on coal and gas prices, things like that. And I reckon, for some people it might seem a bit extreme, the analogy with the Whitlam government, but I think it can actually do more damage. For instance, another one of his crusades, totally, forget cost of living, pushing us to close even more coal-fired power stations just when power prices are going through the roof. And China, the world's biggest emitter, says it's building a lot more of them.
Well, Andrew, I'm here in the Latrobe Valley this evening, and we've got 3 large coal-fired power stations left here. It's the heartland of the Victorian industrial economy, and there are 4 gigawatts of power from those 3 coal power stations. In the last few days, it's been revealed that China has just approved for this year over 100 gigawatts of coal-fired power. So let's just confirm those numbers in your mind here. 4 gigawatts down here in Victoria that we apparently want to shut down as soon as we can and handicap our own industry in Australia. And China in 1 year is going to build 25 times more than the power we have here just in little old eastern Victoria. This is ridiculous. I mean, how is shutting these power stations going to do anything to save the planet? Well, China is taking us all for mugs. We've heard in the last few days that our major cement manufacturer, Adbury, is looking at potentially not being able to continue in Australia without more protection because of Chinese competition. They get cheap power. So the idea that we can shut down our coal-fired power stations and keep our industry is just a lie, especially while China continues to build coal-fired power stations like they're going out of fashion.
And it breaks your heart just where you're standing. If someone right now gave you a shovel, you wouldn't have to dig very far to find cheap coal, brown coal, almost near the surface, right?
It's not really mining, it's gardening, I like to call it, Latrobe Valley. Yeah, well, yeah, from us up in Queensland, we don't really consider this mining down here, but I shouldn't say that while I'm in Victoria.
No, but it's true, isn't it? I mean, it's just just a few feet under where you're standing, and we're saying we can't use it. Cheap as chips. You can almost pick it up with your bare hands. Hundreds of years of supply of energy, and we're saying no, we can't use it because global warming. It could make you weep for the future of this country. Matt, talking about strange things, there are so many weird things going on. I just wonder whether we're living in a parallel universe now. The Albanese government's going to spend another $3.5 million of our money, when we're deep in debt, on billionaire Twiggy Forrest's yacht as part of a $12 million research project that Forrest's Minderoo Foundation has planned to, research on DNA in the ocean. Fair enough?
Yeah, it's a good thing we don't have people struggling to pay their bills right now, and apparently we have enough money in Canberra, enough of your money in Canberra, to hand out over $3 million to one of the richest blokes in this country to presumably help cross-subsidise his super yacht. I mean, I can't believe it. So, I mean, you sort of can believe it. I mean, this is the modern Labor Party. They've long since forgotten the workers here at Loy Yang, at your lawn. They really don't understand those high-vis workers who live around here in the Latrobe Valley. Instead, they like to hobnob with the likes of Twiggy Forrest, and they must get this piece of paper across their desk and think, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's sign a cheque for $3 million. I don't think Twiggy needs it, and it's certainly not what our country can afford right now.
I don't know. Twiggy seems to be fairly keen on government subsidies. I mean, he's going around the country with his green hydrogen scheme, making electricity out of, or making a gas out of, a fuel out of water. And the key part of this plan seems to be government subsidies.
Yeah, well, he's also, unfortunately, the former government announced a $40 million grant to a, now looks like mothballed hydrogen plant in Gladstone. The American partners he has pulled out of that, but he was going to get $40 million apparently from the federal government. Again, I don't think we have the luxury of focusing on these kinds of trinkets. We are a lucky country, but we have actually made our own luck in the last generation. We made tough decisions on the budget in the Howard era. We introduced tough changes like the GST. But where are the leaders right now making the tough decisions, standing up against maybe the tidal wave of just popular opinion and saying, no, we need to do this for our nation, for our future, for our children? That kind of leadership seems in short supply right now, and it's at a very desperate time in the world. We desperately need to get back to that to make these tough decisions so we don't leave our children mountains of debt and a much weaker economy.